very wonderful devotee, Chaitanya Avatari Prabhu, from Bangalore, I believe, came and spent some time twice here in Naperville, and he's also making visits in other places. I first met him in China, in Beijing. And if I understood it correctly, he's now committed to spend 2 months each year in China, because there's a Hare Krishna explosion happening in China. And he's helping, as he helped here, for giving some guidance to a program that's been called Bhakti Vriksha. It's patterned after what's called in the Christian organization cell church. Have you heard that term before? Did he describe that at all? It's where when the missionary spirit of Christianity wants to reach out to a new population where there isn't a church, they start cell groups. Of course, terrorists, they also use cell groups. I don't know who started it first, but... And then cell division, that's their model. And then you have a certain number of cells, and then you start a church. And that's how the missionaries' model of spreading Christianity in parts of the world where there isn't Christianity. So, taking that model and just giving it a different name, Bhakti Vriksha, because trees have branches that proliferate like cells, divide into multiple cells. So, there's a worldwide system of introducing and giving some initial training to persons who, just by hearing the message of Bhagavad Gita or the message of Bhakti, find it inspiring and would like to learn more. So it's a system of giving that introductory understanding, practices, standards, behaviors, the cultivation of bhakti from a seed to a little boop, little sprout, just beginning. So as I understand from his two visits here, there's already some interest in that model of Bhakti Vriksha and reaching out to people, and some of those persons who have been reached out to are here. So the topic that I was asked to speak about is particularly relevant to persons who are just beginning, because all of us, and I would, there may be some exception, but I would say it's an exception, that all of us, before we were doing this, we were doing something. And it's a reasonable assumption because, according to Bhagavad Gita, faith is intrinsic to the soul. So if you don't have faith in this, you have faith in that, or something else, because it's intrinsic to the soul, according to the modes of nature. Arjuna asks in that chapter, Divisions of Faith, I'm paraphrasing to keep it simple, if people don't have faith in you, don't they have faith in something? And the answer is yes. They have faith in something, because faith is intrinsic to the soul. And if it's not faith in Krishna, it's faith in something. Then the divisions of faith are according to the modes of nature. So all of us, before we were doing this, were doing something that there was some faith in. And, it wasn't until I was 21 that I even heard Krishna's name. Many of you long ago heard Krishna's name, and he was somewhere in the universe of your vocabulary, but exactly who is Krishna and his position wasn't so clear. And so the topic is how to do something that every one of us has had the wonderful opportunity or challenge, whichever way you like to look at things, of taking the faith of wherever we were and evaluating, reposing that same faith in Krishna. That's our subject. Premananda, that's the subject? You want to say it differently, or I like to address what I'm supposed to address? Is that hit the target? Okay. There's many things to say, and I think I'll just start with when Krishna, right after this wonderful pastime of Krishna requested the cowherd. The cowherd boys go out every day to herd the cows and the calves together, and they engage in loving pastime with Krishna. Both the cowherd boys and the cows, or the calves. In this case, he's very young. The calves. So one day, although their mothers send them with ample lunch, little lunch bag, this particular day, way before lunch, they came to Krishna and said, "We're really hungry. We're really hungry. Little boys, we're really hungry. 6 years old, we're really hungry." So Krishna had a plan. And Krishna's plan was to show to show the Brahmanas that their wives were more exalted than them. That was one of the things he wanted to do. So he sent the boys to a place where there was a yajna being performed. The Brahmanas were doing a yajna. And that's a signal that says if you have a little device, please turn it in the off or vibrate mode. Thank you. So, I don't want to get lost. I want to get to the faith. But the Brahmanas had faith in their performance of yajna without the purpose behind the yajna. Yajna vai Vishnu, according to the Vedas. The purpose of yajna is to satisfy Vishnu. In fact, within the acts of sacrifice, Vishnu is situated. Within the acts of sacrifice, he's there. So when the cowherd boys went to say, Krishna said, "You can use my name." You know what that means. And you know what when they said, "We're really hungry. Can you have so many items here? Can you give us some of these items?" And you know what the Brahmanas said? They didn't say anything. They didn't even say no. They just ignored them. Like, you're not even worthy of saying no to. Really rude. So the cowherd boys came back. They were really disappointed. They said, "Oh, Krishna," they didn't even talk to us. Krishna smiled knowingly. And Krishna said, "Now go to the wives of the Brahmanas and ask them the same thing." And what did the wives of the Brahmanas do? "Quickly, let's bring edibles to bring to cowherd boys and Krishna and Balaram," and off they went in a very enthusiastic and loving mood. And so Krishna accepted their loving service because it was performed with love. And it's Krishna's nature. Whatever you offer to Krishna with love, he accepts. Patram, pushpam, palam, toyam, yome bhaktya prayachati. Just offer with love and devotion. And even something very simple, he'll offer, he'll accept. He accepts the love, not just the article. He doesn't need a leaf or anything. So wonderful exchange with the wives of the Brahmanas. This is by Govardhan Hill, this pastime. And so the boys had their meal, and then Krishna went down by the side of Govardhan Hill a little further, and he saw a huge arrangement for another sacrifice that his father was doing. So he asked his father, this is the faith question, "My dear Nanda Maharaj, could you tell me what is all this arrangement for? It looked like a sacrifice. Is it something that's a family tradition, or is it enjoined in the Vedas?" Now, why did he ask that question? Because something that's family tradition is important. It's not a 0, but it's not a 10 either. And something that's enjoined in the Vedas, for one who has faith in the Vedas, it's a 10. If it's enjoined in the Vedas, you do that which is enjoined in the Vedas because it's enjoined in the Vedas. And that's based on having faith in the Vedas. So one who has faith in the Vedas follows the Vedas. Now supposing you don't have Nanda Maharaj to go to, or some authority to go to, and then it's more a family tradition. Like I do something because my mother and father or my grandmother did something, and so that's what I do. And scratch the surface a little bit, and below the surface, why my mother, father, or my grandmother do, I don't know. It's just, I do what they do because it's tradition. And it must be something within the Vedas. Or take it outside of Vedic culture and whatever is the other tradition, different schools of Christianity. So, besides Christianity, schools of Christianity. Or, I don't understand it at all, but different groups of Muslims don't seem to get along with another group of Muslims. And they fight. Or, just put here. Or in Ireland, that the Protestants and the Catholics, for some decades, they were, bloody war, killing each other off over which view of Christianity is the right one. But, according to Bhagavad Gita, it's the modes of nature at work. And when you destroy other people because they don't have the same religion you do, it sounds like there's a strong influence of tamagun, because tamagun is destruction. But faith, according to the modes of nature. Now, we'll go back to the Vedic paradigm, and we'll look around a little bit too. What's the purpose of the Vedas? What is it that the Vedas are pursuing? Some people say, according to what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, most people have the idea the purpose of the Vedas is to guide your life so you can live piously, so that you can gain pious credits, punya, and based on that punya you can prosper in this life, and after this life you go to Swarga. And there's nothing more. Krishna says it in chapter 2 Bhagavad Gita. Most people think that's what the Vedas are for. And it's true, most people not only think the Vedas are, they think that's what Christianity is for, and they think that Muslim teaching you could go to heaven. And transpose that, and even, the language is certainly different, but in Buddhism, in China, they have this place that's called time to go. Nice try. I forget what they call it right now. They have a nice name for it, but it's heaven. This is Buddhism. And their goal is nirvana, nothingness. But if you don't make it to nothingness, you go to this nice place. And then you get trained up to go to the place of nothingness. Anyway, elevation through piety and being compassionate, being nonviolent, giving charitably, etc. Be good, don't hurt people, kind of, whatever the language is and the culture, local culture. That's the mode of goodness idea, and with the mode of goodness idea you go to this higher destination. But what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that's not the purpose of the Vedas. In fact, he explicitly says, what he explicitly says is, Abrahma bhuvanal loka purnar avartanarjuna. Don't aspire, Arjuna, do not aspire even for the beyond Svarga loka, and Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, even Brahmaloka. Don't aspire for even Brahmaloka or the lowest, because therein repeated birth and death take place. So then it sounds like the goal is moksha. So some people think the purpose of the Vedas is moksha. I had a very interesting, just sharing to make it relevant and current, a plane ride from Houston, Texas to St. Louis. And in the seat next to me was a lady in her 40s or early 50s, something like that, from Brazil. She was reading a book in English, so she's certainly, fluent in English. And it was her first visit to America. She spent 5 days in Houston and was saying, it's so materialistic in Houston. Is all of America like this? Very materialistic. And then she was exploring, I was dressed as I'm dressed now, what are the teachings that I've been following? Are you a monk, and what are the teachings? So we got on the topic of liberation, and she said, I don't like this idea of liberation because it's still self-centered. It's all about me and my liberation. I said, wow. But there's another kind, there's beyond that liberation. What's that? It's where your thought is simply of the personality of Godhead, and being in your eternal relationship of loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore naturally having a concern for the part and parcel living entities that are connected to Him eternally. And therefore a natural compassion and a life of service follows that. Service to the Supreme, and service to the parts and parcels of the Supreme connected to Him. So there's a faith, what I'm pointing to is, there's a faith beyond elevation to heaven, there's a faith beyond liberation, and there's a faith beyond going to an eternal kingdom, but it's simply being in loving service to the Supreme Being now, and whatever that happens after now, the next moment and the next, whatever it is, whatever the destination of the Supreme wishes us to be in service to Him. So it begs the question, what's the Supreme? I'm speaking now on this question of faith. And the Vedanta says, whatever it is that's the source of everything, there's the source of everything. Whatever that is that's the source of everything, that's the absolute truth, and one should be situated in knowledge of the absolute truth. And then there's different phases of realization of that absolute truth, and that also makes divisions of faith beyond the modes of nature. You with me? Faith beyond the modes of nature. Because there's faith within the modes of nature, and there's faith beyond the modes of nature, depending upon one's conception of the source of everything. And there's divisions, or different aspects of that absolute truth. There's the all-pervasive Brahman, Sat. Take away all the temporary, just strip away all the veneer of everything that's temporary, what's left. Sat, existence, eternal existence, spirit. And that's a realization of the absolute truth. Beyond the temporary, there's the eternal. Sat, Brahman, the all-pervasive effulgence, everywhere existing. And then there's another feature, the localized feature, that's Paramatma, that's supreme, that's within the heart of every living being. Another aspect of that absolute truth. Chit, knowledge comes from that Paramatma, so Sat and Chit. And then there's a third, and that's the personal feature, Ananda. The source of pleasure is being in loving service to that supreme person. The exchange of love is Ananda with the supreme Paramananda, the supreme person. So there's faith in transcendence. Now, back to the source of everything. One may have faith in something over here. Prabhupada writes about this in Nectar Devotion. Even in Aborigine society, they have faith. They worship something. They worship a mountain. I know some persons that became very interested in indigenous American Indian culture. And certain birds they worship, or feathers of those birds they worship, they consider them sacred. And there's powers in this and that. So where there's some power, then the worship may go there. The power of a waterfall or something. Pantheism. That's a kind of worship. Worship in nature, the power of nature. All I'm saying here is there's faith naturally goes to where there's some exhibition of some aspect of God, because power comes from powerful. The highest form of faith is where everything comes from. So, search of the Vedas is, where does everything come from? So, within the scriptures of the world, there's this understanding everything comes from God. Of course, scientists don't like that idea, but scripture has that idea. Everything comes from God. So there's different conceptions of God. Impersonal, localized within the heart, and personal. And then in the personal side, there's more complete understanding of the form, the qualities, the pastimes, the abode, the exchanges of love that take place between the Supreme Person and those who are associated with him. And that's a more complete conception than the others. I'll say it again in a different way. Within names of God, the scriptures teach us, within the names of God, all of God's potencies are there. Nam Nam Akari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis. Sarva Shaktis. Nija Sarva Shaktis. Within, there's Bahunam, there's so many names, countless numbers of names of God, and in each and every one of those names, Nija Sarva Shaktis, all of God's potencies are invested. Now, There's primary and there's secondary names. Secondary names identify his post or position. Ishvara, Adhoksaja, Yogeshwara, like that. Ajita. These are names that indicate his infallibility, his possessing of unlimited potency, his divinity. And then there's primary names that speak of him and his relationships with those who are in his association. Classic are Nanda Nandana or Yasoda Nandana. It's Krishna and his relationship with Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yasoda, etc. Like the names of the deities. Radha Shamasundar, Radha Vrindavan Chandra, Radha Madhava, as we were hearing during Kirtan. Krishna and his devotees. Parthasarathi, Krishna and his devotees. These are primary names because those primary names evoke or carry the potency that stimulate love of the personal feature of the Supreme, and the others invoke recognition of the awe and reverence feature of him. Like a worldly example is a high court judge. And the high court judge is addressed as Your Honor. And that's not what his wife and children say. So in the formal situation, it's Your Honor or Mr. President. That's how the media addresses the president. The wife and the children don't say Mr. President. So there's the formal post, and then there's the personal dealings in his home and intimate settings. That's the primary names of Krishna are like that. What I'm indicating is there are different conceptions and therefore different kinds of faith based upon the conception. So now just a little practical sharing. As I mentioned, it wasn't until I was in my early 20s I even heard Krishna's name. But I had some faith. And that faith, I will say, has served me well. And then I started asking some questions that within the faith and the tradition that I was following, I couldn't find answers. I had done it as a teenager, and I just got a pat on the head saying, oh, that's a nice question, with no answers. So then later on, I started sincerely searching for answers with questions that I did. So much time passed examining other sources of teachings, and when I came across not just Bhagavad Gita, because I read 7 translations of Bhagavad Gita before I came to number 8, and I couldn't understand the ascending knowledge type of rendering of Bhagavad Gita. The same book, same verses in Sanskrit rendered into English, not so much different in the translation, but a big difference in the commentary. And then when I read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, the light went on. So, for me, there was a period of time when I had this, I call it an existential dilemma, where I was practicing, a young man, undergraduate school graduate, on to medical school, took a leave of absence, chanting Hare Krishna, wondering, am I abandoning my faith, like many may have done from some other, whatever their practice was before? Am I offending Lord Shiva, or I'm offending Hanuman, or whatever, Devi, or something, whatever one's prior practice? And the conclusion that I came to, I'm doing it fast, it took a few months. The conclusion I came to is no. I'm just taking that faith which I had previously, and now it's maturing, just like a seed becomes a sprout, the sprout becomes, multiple leaves, and then it just keeps growing. Because the conception of the personal feature of God became more clear. And it was coming down in this disciplic succession manner, and so it acted. There was a spiritual potency that illumined in a way that what I had done before didn't. So it's not like I abandoned a faith, I just matured in faith. And towards, this is important, towards the source of everything. And the source of everything is an unlimitedly potent Supreme Person who is very kind. And we reach towards that unlimitedly potent, loving Supreme Person, and there's some reciprocation. It's not only something we do from our side, there's reciprocation. And it's defined or described and identified within the scripture. Hare Krishna. It's not a matter of abandoning faith, it's a matter of maturing faith. Based upon sound vibration, and where does that faith get reposed? Go back again. Faith is intrinsic to every living entity. We can't exist without faith. We can't walk across the floor without faith. We would fall in. But we have faith the floor is going to hold us. So we walk across the floor. The good engineering, and it's pretty safe. So faith is not without a reason. And so ultimately faith is directed, according to scriptural teaching, is ultimately towards the source of everything. So we need to know what is the source of everything. And how do you know what the source of everything is? Except through disclosure from Scripture. It's common sense. Chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives the common sense. He says, nobody knows me because I existed before everything existed. So how can you know what existed before you existed? Because it was there before you existed. How can you know? You can't know. He says it. With one exception, unless what existed before you existed discloses. Then you can know. And that's how you know, by disclosure. And otherwise you can't know. So there has to be faith. Otherwise you can't know. But we don't dismiss faith because it's of the soul. I'm going to have faith in something. I may have faith in my mind. I may have faith in my grandmother. I may have faith in Marx and Lenin. Prabhupada had that discussion with Professor Kotovsky in Moscow. He was invited. He went. He was sitting with Professor Kotovsky. He said, what's the difference between you and me? You have an authority. Lenin, I have my authority. Krishna. So what's the difference between us? Now, Lenin says classless society, and Krishna says divisions of society. And I see in Moscow, I see divisions of society, or it's classless society. I go for my walk in the morning, and I see there's a lady sweeping the street, and there's a big limousine bringing the diplomat to the Kremlin. And I come and visit you, and you're a professor sitting in your office. I see Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Shudras. And then during the busy part of the day, there's people out in the marketplace. There's the Vaishyas and the agricultural people raising their crops. I see divisions of society. So should I accept Krishna or should I accept Lenin? What's the difference between us? I say Krishna's a better authority than Lenin. It's within reason. Besides, that's my belief. You follow? Everything ultimately it rests on faith, but faith is also guided by or assisted by reason. Like Arjuna says in Bhagavad Gita, after seeing the hearing Krishna speak the essential verses of Bhagavad Gita, he declares, Para Brahma, Para Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan, Purusham, Shashvatam, Divyam. You're the personality of Godhead. You're the source of everything. And it's not just my opinion. The great authorities, they've also said. Devla, Asita, Janaka, they've all said. And the Vedas say, Krishna's the source of everything. So on the basis of authority, we accept Krishna is the source of everything. And the source of everything means everything. There isn't anything that's Krishna's not the source of. Or say it the opposite. There's two things. There's Krishna and there's Krishnas. And there's not a third thing. So one may have faith in Krishna's Shakti, and one can become a Shakta. Or Krishna's expansions, or Krishna's some potency given to the waterfalls, or a bird, or something in nature. But that Shakti is from Shaktiman. So faith that's complete goes to the source of everything. It's a simple example that's given is watering the root of a tree. If you find the root of the tree and pour water on the root of the tree, nourishment goes to the whole tree. All the leaves, branches, twigs, trunk, you name it. It goes to all the parts of the tree. How? Finding the root of existence. Faith is to place whatever it is, the tendency for worship or the tendency for seeking fulfillment, on the root of all existence. There's so many things to say about this topic. I'll come back around to the starting point in just a moment. In Lord Chaitanya's teachings, he gives a really simple definition of faith. Shraddha, Shabde, it's in Bengali, Vishwas Kahe, Sudridha Nishchaya. Faith is having confidence that if I just do this one thing, all other things will be fulfilled. Like, some persons have faith, get money. By hook or crook, get money. Because if you get money, you can buy happiness. So that's what they do. They just focus on get money. Other people have some other kind of faith. Get a gold medal in the Olympics. So their whole life is focused for very intensely. Just don't do anything other things. They just do that one thing. Or the other things are to assist that one thing. Get the gold medal. Because that's the goal. Or somebody that has an addiction. Get that addiction item, whatever that one is, alcohol or heroin or something. They'll do anything to get that one thing. Break the law, risk their life, anything to get that one thing. So, Lord Chaitanya's definition of faith, it's not, get addicted, but by achieving this one thing. There may be many things that we wish, but if you achieve this one, faith is you achieve this one thing, and all other things that are desirable are fulfilled. That's faith. That's his definition. Then he gives Krishna Bhakti, devotion unto Krishna. Sarva karma kritahaya, everything is fulfilled. Just get Krishna bhakti. Why Krishna bhakti and not some other? Because Krishna is the source of everything. And he's the root of all existence. And everything comes from him. So whatever it is. Maybe material desire. So people go to God to fulfill material desire because he has a big warehouse. He can supply everything in unlimited quantity. And it comes at a good price. Just go and pray and do good things, and you get good things from his warehouse. So he's seen by some as an order supplier of your material desire. Sarva kama, or some moksha kama, they desire liberation. Like this lady from Brazil was saying, I don't like this idea of moksha, it's just another selfishness. People become obsessed with getting what they want, their liberation. It's all about themselves. I don't like it. But then there's akama. So akama, sarva kama, moksha kama, udharadi, those whose intelligence is udhara. Broad, big. Tivrena bhakti yogena. They engage in tivra bhakti, very bhakti unto Krishna, because he's the source of everything. These things are easily understood from the source of Bhagavad Gita. Or say it the other way. If one accepts Bhagavad Gita, these things are easily understood. Now supposing somebody doesn't accept Bhagavad Gita, then they'll accept something else. And according to that something else that they accept, they'll have some convictions. They'll have some faith. Now, according to Bhagavad Gita, those faiths are either incomplete or wrongly done. And even they're Vedic, like worship of the demigods. Yanti Deva Vrata Devan. You worship the Devas, you go to that place. Pitri, you worship the forefathers, you go to that place. You worship Krishna, you go to Krishna. And they're different places. By hearing properly the message of Bhagavad Gita, whatever your background or tradition may have been, it's very clear. Very clear. Krishna is he's the root of all existence. He says it multiple times in Bhagavad Gita. So place the tendency to worship there, the root of all existence. Pour the water on the root of the tree. And then whatever I did before or someone else may have done before according to their tradition and their upbringing, it's fulfilled. Supposing somebody grew up worshipping Hanuman, and then they started reading Bhagavad Gita. And then they feel like I felt, some dilemma. How is Hanuman going to feel if I stop worshipping Hanuman and I worship Ram? Just ask Hanuman. Jai Ram, Shri Ram. That's what Hanuman will say. And so forth. Whatever the background tradition. Now that's a matter of faith. And faith is nurtured by the hearing process. And where we hear from is really essential. One of the things I'm looking at the clock. I want to leave time for discussion. But I'm throwing out some things that hopefully will stimulate some discussion. One of the things that I very much appreciated about how Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness, his purports, was he addressed the why questions. This is my sense. He didn't say it this way, it's my sense. Because he knew his audience. And the modern audience, my training in academics was you don't just accept, you ask why. And you're supposed to ask why. I mean, sometimes you're not supposed to. Like, where'd the Big Bang come from? Don't ask that one. I had this discussion with a professor at Washington University, whose his field is physics, and he married. His wife was a practicing devotee, so now he's learning Sankhya philosophy and Krishna's teaching. So, like, he's had this picture of what physics says. We're having some nice exchanges on this. And then there's what he's reading in the Vedas, and Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's wondering, how do you fit the two together? Because I got to be a professor. That's my profession. I'm a professor of physics. How do I put the two together? And he was explaining, we're specifically taught, I didn't know this, don't ask why the Big Bang, where does it come from? You don't ask it, you just measure it. Kaboom. And then, his specific thing was the universe is not only spreading, but the accelerating, the rate of expansion is accelerating. They can measure it by various empiric methods. Is there anything you want to know? Is there anything comparable in the Vedas about the accelerating expansion of the universe? I said, I don't have that information, but here's some resources that may. But I found it very interesting that you're not supposed, he said it a few times, you're not supposed to ask. It's disciplined. You don't ask. It's irritating. I mean, I attended a IGSA, Indian Graduate Student Association gathering at University of Houston. And it was in this little amphitheater. There was a lot of people there. They're all highly educated grad students from India. And the topic that I was discussing that evening was mysteries of the sacred universe. It's Sadhuputa's rendering of the 5th canto Bhagavatam, the structure of the universe. And at the end, it took about an hour and 10 minutes. At the end, one person raised his hand and said, in our studies of physics, we can calculate to milliseconds after the Big Bang what happened mathematically. But where the Big Bang came from, we can't say. Where does the singularity come from? Singularity it's notional. It's unlimited mass in a dimensionless point. Very interesting. Where'd that come from? You don't ask. And then what caused the singularity to explode? You don't ask that either. You just measure what happened afterwards. The cause behind the effect, you look at from that point forward, but not beyond that point. It begs the question, doesn't it? But you're not supposed to ask it. And then the next graduate student said, and there's two theories what happens when the expansion goes and goes and goes. Either one, the two theories are the gravitational force is lost, and so matter just dissipates into nothingness. That's one theory. Theoretical physics. And then the other is everything implodes. It reaches a certain point, it can't hold itself anymore, it implodes back. And I forget the name, there's not this recent guy, a professor that sits in a wheelchair, not that one, but there's another one that had his own television show, and he likes the implode model because he likes the Vedas because it speaks that time is cyclical. So from that imploding, then there's a resting, and then there's another explosion. He likes the model. What's his name? Yes. Thank you, Carl Sagan. Thank you. He likes the Vedas. He likes Sankhya philosophy, but he likes atheistic Sankhya philosophy, not Devahuti Putra Kapila's Sankhya philosophy. So, faith in something measurable is what scientists do, and then, matter and the laws that govern matter, that's all there is. Where does matter come from, and where do the laws come from, and who oversees the laws? Don't ask that question. Just that's God. You say God is the one that creates matter. We say God is matter. And there's laws governing matter, and that's it. That's God. That's all there is. So there's a faith in that. So where you hear from is going to, like this physics professor, where you hear from is going to help shape your faith. And when you're making a transition from something that, like in his case, or in my case, I had a Christian upbringing and a science upbringing, and then I read Bhagavad Gita. And there was some transformation of faith based on hearing. And over a period of time, not just blindly accepting, I promise you, I was the opposite of blindly accepting. I was challenging. Not, I want to prove it wrong, but I want to know for my own conviction what's true. So with that spirit, that kind of spirit, faith can be nurtured to the point where you can actually know. And when you actually know, and to the degree that you actually know, then your faith becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And ultimately, faith carries one to the stage of prema bhakti. That's the goal. Nitya siddha Krishna prema sadhya kabunoi shravanadi shuddha chitte karaye udoy. Again, Lord Chaitanya. Krishna prema is already there. It's inside, and it's awakened by hearing. Faith is nourished by hearing from the right source. And if you don't hear from the right source, your faith will be nourished towards whatever that other source is, unless you just can't buy it. There's something missing. And I think we've all felt that feeling. There's something missing. Otherwise, we'd be doing that something else instead of here. Okay, 20 after 8. Continue with the process of hearing, not with the goal of I want to believe, I want to accept, but with the I want to understand, I want to know. I want to know truth with a capital T, reality with a capital R. I want to know the absolute truth. Not just because someone else says it, but because it's a conviction I can embrace. I want to get to that place. Here with that intent or intention. And see what happens. And then, if it's the right source of knowledge, faith will be transformed. Use your discriminating powers. Don't shut them off. Don't be blindly accepting. Don't be blindly challenging. Just hear with the intent that I wish to know. That's adau shraddha, preliminary faith. And then hearing from the right source, things grow. Faith will grow. Faith will be nourished. Did I get the topic all right? Okay, so any especially our newer guests and visitors here. Any questions or comments, discussion? Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, my question is regarding the traditions and the geographical traditions that sometimes our parents or grandparents following. Through the Krishna consciousness, I might have faith in following the tradition, not following some part because I'm not convinced. But then trying to stop or trying to explain to parents or grandparents.
That's a whole other matter. What to do? Several things. One, by your good character, that will be more compelling and convincing than anything you might say. Achar, more than prachar. They'll see, wow, our relative is becoming, our son or whatever, is becoming so happy and so this and so that, and such a nice mood and nice. He's becoming transformed. Whatever he's doing is good. So then let them ask you, what's going on? What are you doing? Then the door's open, then you can say something, and when you say something, next, modest. Because, it's advice in Bhagavad Gita, don't disturb their faith. Nourish their faith to go to another standard or another level by your good conduct, your good character, your happiness, your brilliance, your bright face. So you wear your bhakti inside and be a little careful about, unless they want it. Depends. Different parents are different. Be very patient. Especially, two things. Young bamboo can bend, old bamboo will break. So don't break. Just, movement, let the movement be gradual. And then another is, it's not unusual for parents to think, oh, you're big and I'm small, or you're rejecting the values that we passed on to you. So it's hurtful. They may sometimes feel hurt. So if you're coming on with, this is better than that, or please explore this, there's what you're telling us is the way that we trained you was wrong. It should have been like this. That's not what you're saying, but some defense wall may be there that says that's what you're saying. Although it's not at all your intention. So be careful. Very patient. And especially, this is my experience, it's much easier if outside of their circle of social networking and stuff, they come and spend some time with you. And they see how you are living, and they see how, this way of life then a light goes on. Wow. Unless they're really bored, they just want to watch television, they can't get out and about, because they don't drive, and you got to drive in America to get out and about. And they feel bored. But if there's an inclination for spiritual activity, there's plenty of opportunity. I've seen many parents become transformed in that scenario. And not so much the other way, because there's so much social obligation and other things that filling their lives with the other, whatever it is. Social and whatever the other kind of religious activities are. And financial, and taking care of the house, and busy.
Thank you.
Up front.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, you gave us the example of Mr. President. He is different for his family and for his citizens. So he can able to distinguish among the devotee and the devotee. And for Krishna, he is a loving service of everyone. From the scriptures.
Is the microphone on? Yes? Yes? Could you hear her? Should she say it again? Say it again, slowly.
Sure. So you gave us the example of Mr. President Maharaj.
The President, Mr. President, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for him, the family is different, the citizens are different.
Yes.
So he could able to distinguish among both of them and can deal.
Yeah.
For Krishna, he is a loving father of
Yes.
everyone.
Yes.
While reading the scriptures, it's like his dealings in the Vaikuntha planet is different from his dealings in the Shirabdi, or when he comes his incarnation, his dealings are again different.
Sure, and his situation as super soul within the heart is also different.
So how is he able to manage among all of us?
Oh, he has no problem. He's unlimited. The simple, here's Jiva Goswami. There's no question of understanding in God without accepting that he has unlimited and inconceivable potencies. And, conversely, by accepting God has unlimited, inconceivable potencies, it's very easy to understand him. So, our limitations are not his. We'd have circuit overload. We couldn't handle what he handles.
Yes, Maharaj. But one more thing is, how will we cultivate our faith, Maharaj? It's like Krishna is killing one elephant and saving other elephant. So in that case...
Well, it just it depends on your heart, or each of our hearts, but, a very simple response is, how wonderful is my Krishna? That's very simple. He reciprocates with every living entity perfectly. And especially in the spiritual exchanges, that when Krishna performs his pastimes in his different places where he performs his pastimes, and Ramchandra likewise, it's specific for each and every individual. It's unique and perfect, customized for the individual according to their heart, their regard for him. And he says it in Bhagavad Gita, but the pastimes of Krishna and his exchanges with his devotees illustrate it. Unlimitedly perfect and variegated. Because there's varieties of living entities, and there's varieties of love, and the exchanges are perfect. And then there's persons that are semi, and there's persons that are anti, and the reciprocation with them is also perfect. It's just, it's kindness given in different ways, according to an individual's regard for him. That's so. In summary, what I'm saying is that's just his nature, and you can marvel how wonderful is Krishna in different ways, unlimitedly different. Anything else? Yeah, you have something.
Maharaj. I have two questions, Maharaj. One is, you mentioned faith should be based on proper reason. I also remember you mentioning in one of the earlier lectures that faith is also based on knowledge, Maharaj.
Yes.
So, in my spiritual life, it's not due to lack of any. I have the proper resources for getting that knowledge and with the proper reason, but the transformation is not happening. So, is it
Offenses. Offenses. And just editing in something you said, faith is not based upon reason. Faith is not against reason, it's assisted by reason, but it's not based on reason. So, your second question?
At the beginning of the lecture, Maharaj, you were mentioning about faith in the mode of transcendence. I was just trying to understand it more clearly. Just remembering Prabhupada's point where he says, at least accept Krishna, at least theoretically accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
That's the beginning.
So, does that acceptance necessarily mean that we have faith in transcendence, Maharaj? Or I feel that it is based on the consciousness that one has, the degree of the...
I'm listening. I don't get your point.
Theoretically accepting Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj, and whereas consciously feeling that to a different degree.
Okay, that's more mature. It's far more mature, the second one. And then there's stages in between. But you have to start somewhere. That's Prabhupada, the first part.
Is that mode of transcendence, Maharaj? Accepting theory?
Is it mode of transcendence?
Faith in the mode of transcendence?
Faith in the mode of transcendence. Well, yes and no. It's the beginning. There's a seed. It's not even an unripe mango compared to a ripe mango. It's just a seed. It's the beginning. A seed of faith. I'll just take my own example. When I first hearing Bhagavad Gita and hearing Krishna's name, and it's like a blank slate. So I didn't right away theoretically accept Krishna as the personality of God. I was exploring the possibility. Well, I didn't even know what the personality of God had meant. I never heard the term before. So, but the starting point was, I want to know. And then I heard from one who knows. I heard from others that didn't know. Nothing happened. Not even theoretical. That's the starting point, the seed. Now, back to this, I gave a short answer. It's due to offense. What's the verse? Canto 2, Chapter 3, text number, the steel-framed heart, 20-something? What's the text number? You look it up. There's a verse that she's looking up where Shukadeva Goswami is explaining to Shukadeva Goswami is explaining to Maharaj 24. that the heart is steel framed if, when hearing the holy name, the heart doesn't become transformed and symptoms of bhava manifest in the body. And then in the purport, Prabhupada said it's because of offense. So read that. It's a long purport, very informative. And there's the answer. Due to offense. And then how to overcome offenses is explained.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You hear me? Hello?
Yeah, you're on. You're on.
Okay. So I had a question actually about, you were first a Christian.
I referred to?
I'm sorry?
Say it again?
You were first a Christian. Is that correct? Before you...
Yes, yes.
So...
I didn't exactly convert.
No, I understand. I understand.
I grew.
Upgraded, sort of thing.
It's important.
Yes.
Because that was the existential dilemma. I wasn't abandoning.
Mm-hmm.
I was just maturing.
Okay.
I felt really bad that I'm becoming a traitor. It's important.
Yes.
So I'm stopping on it. There's one of the followers of Christ was named Judas.
Yes.
Judas of Iscariot. And he denied Christ. And he felt really bad. So I was thinking, am I like that? So, it's not that. It's not converting. Okay, go ahead.
No, so my question actually was, so will we consider that Christianity is correct but it's not complete?
Yes, yes.
But why won't, because in the experience of each individual, like a Christian for instance, they would think that is the complete thing and the only faith. The same thing would be said about, say, Muslims or people of other religions. So if the truth is so obvious, why is it so much based on different people's experience being different? And so that's basically my question. Like,
it depends on how you're asking. The question can mean different things depending upon how you mean it. So I'll go back to something I said earlier. Where you hear from is going to nourish your faith. And when you hear something that's other than that which you're accustomed to hear, it may challenge that faith because that you've been accustomed to hear something. I'll give an example. It's like a nice example. Mm-hmm. Christian example. At Washington University, there's a freshman, or an undergraduate, that came from a family that's Christian Science. Probably never heard of it before.
Yeah, even I don't know.
Christian Science, it's a division. And I asked her, why'd you come? She said, because my mom, when she was little, she had a Bhagavad Gita, and she read Bhagavad Gita. And it's been on the shelf, and I've always wanted Bhagavad Gita, so I saw there's Bhagavad Gita discussion, so I came. It's not like she's giving up her Christian Science. So I said, you know, when I was in high school, like a few years ago, there was a family that was Christian Science family. I never had the opportunity to ask them, and so I'm curious, just out of curiosity. Would you mind giving me an understanding what are the core concepts or faith, beliefs in Christian Science? She said, well, I'm not a scholar, but this is what I've understood. I said, fine. And then if, I can share with you how it matches what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Mm-hmm. And it was one-to-one. Many things.
Okay.
Where it started with, chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita. Our real identity is soul, not the body. I said, wow, that's a good start. And then the soul is eternal, and we keep going from one body to the next body until we achieve perfection. I said, wow, Samsara. Fantastic. What else?
Yeah. But if I
let me just do this.
Yeah.
And God is a person. And I said, wow. I mean, it's not just a force or power, but a person. So then I said, and when you go to God, what's it like there? Does your scripture tell you that? She said, well, and then it started getting, fair to partly cloudy. Mm-hmm. Not so clear. Said, well, yes, people, extending the discussion, people can go there and they can send a message back. This is what it's like. So I said, any of that report, what it's like? And she said, well, I don't know. I said, well, here's the report from those that have gone to Krishna, what it's like. It's called Goloka. And in Goloka, there's loving associates and transcendental cows. She said, no. I said, why no? She said, well, you can't have cows. I said, why you can't have cows? The saying, as above, so below. Why you can't have cows? She said, no. Why no? Well, you can't have cows. It's like unreasonable. And it's not cows like here. These are cows that are like those cows, and those cows are Surabhi cows, and it's a different, not just a different species of cow. It's just a transcendental form. Like the form of God it's Satchitananda Vigraha. I started describing that. And here there's forms that are Asat, Achit, and Avigraha. They're not blissful. They give pain. There's sensation, but it comes and it goes. Mm-hmm. So she said, I have to think about it. And I'll ask my mom. But so, my point is, hearing, there's things that match, and it was like really comfortable. And then something that doesn't match, that's just a more complete understanding of what she had heard. Mm-hmm. Not like better, it's just a more complete understanding. And it doesn't go in so easily. It's a little bit like this discussion about, parents. So where you hear from has a profound effect on your faith. Okay. Therefore, hearing in disciplic succession is a core message of Bhagavad Gita. And back to this item of knowledge. Without knowledge that doesn't come in disciplic succession, yoga nashta parantapa. Knowledge is lost. So whatever it is that's for each of us in this room, our position, it's not throw it away, faith. It's here in this knowledge of disciplic succession and see what happens in the faith department, in the knowledge department, in the devotion to the Supreme department. Mm-hmm. Does that help?
Yeah.
Did it address your question?
Somewhat. But
somewhat.
If I have one more question.
Okay, keep going.
Does everything that, like Hinduism, ISKCON, we don't believe that Jesus Christ was sacrificed for sins of man. We don't believe that.
Why not?
I mean, I don't know. We don't speak about that.
Well,
but in Christianity, that is the core belief. So are you saying you still have that, or because you say you can convert?
Where is Shatarupa? Oh, she's with the kids. Shatarupa did some little research. Okay. And you know who Shatarupa is? She's with the kids.
No, I don't know what it is.
You know who Prema Tarangani is?
Yeah.
So she can send you the file, okay. And there's references to Christ in Prabhupada's writings.
I see.
And there's, Bhavishya Purana that speaks of Christ, and she'll send you that file too.
Okay.
So there's reference not by name, but by character, okay. in the Puranas. And there's directly by name by Prabhupada in his purports, speaking authoritatively about the position of Christ.
Okay. That is something I didn't know about.
Is that going to help?
Yes.
Good. Okay, it's 8:45. Do we have one more question?
No. Hare Krishna. The question is more on the faith itself.
Okay.
I would start with an example actually. when you, I mean, like, you have, when you say someone is my best friend,
Someone is
my best friend,
best friend.
so I say like, I have faith in him.
Okay.
And faith basically has another side of it. It is basically expectation. It comes as
Not it can, not necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Okay.
But it unconsciously have the other side of it. That is expectation. I mean, I would say like when you say like Krishna is supreme Godhead, I'm putting that piece into place, saying that I have faith in it. Saying that when I'm in trouble,
He's going to come and pick me up.
so that is something I'm putting in as expectation. It may or may not be a material expectation, but it's something you think put as an expectation. So a faith, so basically managing your faith without expectation is basically
Love.
love. And that's where, I mean, I would say like you should love Krishna
Yes.
rather than putting like these terms faith, because it has expectation.
Okay. I think I understand what you're saying. Let me ask you. As above, so below. Right? You know the phrase? As above, so below. Whatever things that exist here have their spiritual counterpart. There's form here because in the spiritual world there's form. There's cows here because in Goloka there's cows in Goloka, etc. Whatever there is here, there's a spiritual counterpart. So here there's faith with expectation. There, it's love, but love isn't devoid of faith. Love can be devoid of expectation, and faith can also be devoid of expectation. Faith can be devoid of expectation in the pure sense. As there can be love in this world, it's not really love. It's I give and I receive. You're my friend because you fulfill some needs. And if you stop fulfilling those needs, I don't know if you're my friend anymore. But there's friendship in Goloka. There's love in Goloka, and there's faith in Goloka. And for example, here comes Aristasura. He's this giant bull with, huge, and as he walks, the whole earth shakes and so forth. So what do the cowherd men do? Krishna! He's their shelter. Now, in some cases, and with the case of Aristasura, Krishna dealt with him. But there's another example with Kaliya. Krishna was wrapped up in the coils of Kaliya. And they're calling, what are they going to do? Call Krishna to help relieve Krishna from the coils of Kaliya. They went mad. And he stayed there for hours. They were going to give up their lives. They wanted to jump into Kaliya Lake, and if it meant it was too poisonous, they would die. They were going to do it anyway. Balaram stopped them. So, faith doesn't have to include expectation. If it's the faith that's pure, like love that's pure. Here's everything is contaminated in the spiritual realm, or the realm of spiritual perfection. The contamination isn't there. But the pure thing that this is a reflection of.
Right. That's what I'm putting across. That when I say that when we tell about stories about about Krishna, we tell about various ways Krishna helps.
Yes.
So when we say that have faith in him, he will help you. And that's where it comes out.
I got what you're saying.
Yeah. So
I got it the first time. You're saying it again. It's the same thing, just using different words.
No, right.
Our material position is using your language as expectation. Krishna is going to get us out of a problem. Because, where else to repose my faith? I have faith in him because he gets me out of problems. That's the sarva kama. But then there's two other options, moksha kama and akama. And love is where akama. I don't go to Krishna because he's going to get me out of my problems. He may or may not.
Right. So that's where, where we cannot, that's where the faith can break. But
Yes.
if you love him, it will
Yes.
never break.
Yes, yes. I know some people that have extreme difficulty of this kind, that kind, the other kind. And it's a test of faith. And it's an opportunity for faith to grow rather than faith to be broken. And those that are growing in their faith see it that way. And some of those cases, Krishna, the clouds don't clear and the sun shines through. It continues to be a storm. And it's a test of faith. And when that faith comes to the position of prema, there's no expectation. I'll say the same thing in a different way. I like your question. At least I believe I understand your question. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of our great acharyas, says, Bhakti is simply faith. It starts with preliminary faith and it ends with prema. It's just a nurturing and expansion of faith. And there's unsteady, then there's steady, then there's taste, then there's attraction, then there's ecstasy, and then there's love. These are stages. It's just stages of faith. And that stage where it's love or prema, there's no expectation. But before that, there's something, which is what you're saying. I'm not denying that. But that faith exists without expectation, that also exists. That's the pure stage. And that's what we're trying to get to. Until we get there, we have an expectation of some kind or another. And then there's tests. And those tests are just to help. One of the examples of our acharyas is with gold. One of the ways to take the alloys out of the gold is you put it in fire. It gets really hot and it melts. And then the alloys separate from the gold. And then you cool it. Then you have pure gold. Like that. Bhaktisiddhanta calls it fire of ordeal. Now, during that, one has to introspect and say, what am I expecting from Krishna here? Take me out of this. Our teachings say otherwise. But that's if that's your faith, if you have that capacity, and otherwise you don't have the capacity. Krishna may reduce the heat, remove the circumstance. He may or may not. Okay, we've gone past our ordinary time. Thank you very much. You want to make some...
And